Kalen DeBoer says that he knew what he was getting into when he took the Alabama job. Are we sure about that? Welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and it looks like Nate Oats might be sticking around for now and at least trying to take Alabama to the promised land. But first, Kalen DeBoer speaks. And helping me to dive into all of this news that Kalen DeBoer has made, is somebody that you already know very well, the co-host of the popular sports talk show, The Next Round. You can hear it Monday through Friday from 9 to noon Central. He's a guy who stays plugged into Alabama sports. He's seen it all. Jim Dunaway, welcome, sir.
Glad to be here, man. Big fan of not only yours, but the podcast and everything you guys do with your media group there. I joke with your coworkers all the time that as a guy who's been a talking head for 30 years, if it wasn't for the journalists out there who do a lot of the writing and now podcasting and video like you do, I don't know if I'd had anything to talk about the last 30 years. So I appreciate everything you guys do.
Likewise, man. And I steal from my colleagues all the time. They do all the heavy lifting, to say the least. Now I'm just reaping the benefits. But you guys too, man. Love The Next Round, and you guys react to this stuff in real time. Keep everybody in on the conversation. And there was some news this week today before you and I sat down here and started talking. Kalen DeBoer had a sit down interview with On3's Chris Low, the Alabama football program whisperer. Once the Saban whisperer, now the DeBoer whisperer, apparently, where DeBoer talked about his future in Tuscaloosa. And Jim, I'm interested in your perspective on this. DeBoer said, quote, "We're right where we want to be, and I plan on being here for a while." That's obviously in reference to the speculation that was swirling towards the end of last season, his name being mentioned for the Michigan job, the Penn State job, et cetera. DeBoer said, he also said that he didn't come to Alabama to replace Nick Saban, only to turn around after 2 years and go somewhere else. He said, this is Alabama. It's an amazing place. That's the way I was looking at it. I chose to be here. I love the support, and I love our players, and I love the direction everything the staff has done to put the pieces together of the last 2 years. So he said a lot of the heavy lifting's been done to get us to this point. So, Jim, do you take DeBoer's word here, or do you think that any of the Michigan or Penn State smoke was really real?
I think I can trust Kalen DeBoer and what he's saying, but I also believe the Michigan and Penn State things were real. And I do believe that's something Alabama fans will have to get used to, at least in the early part of the DeBoer era, is that other programs are going to want him. For instance, if Marcus Freeman takes an NFL job at some point, I believe Kalen DeBoer will be either one or two on their short list to go to Notre Dame. That will float around to a lot of places in that part of the country. I think if Lincoln Riley were to go to the NFL, Kalen DeBoer's name would be one or two to take over at USC. If Dan Lanning came back to the SEC, I think Kalen DeBoer's name would be one or two to take the job at Oregon. That's the kind of man that Alabama has at their head coaching position. In my opinion, he's going to be in a lot of short lists to replace at a lot of the big programs. And I believe he's earned that reputation. Now, do I ever think he was thinking about leaving Alabama last year? I don't think that was the case. Like he says in the Chris Low story at On3Sports, he was very aware that Michigan was interested in him. And I know that to be true because at one point I texted him. I won't get into our private text, but I texted him at one point between the Iron Bowl and the Oklahoma game, and joked with him about the Michigan opening, how much they were going to be knocking on his door. He is a wanted commodity. Now to where he wants to be, I do believe that he took the Alabama job because of the opportunity to win a national championship. And it is my belief when he got to Alabama, there were probably a few more obstacles than maybe those on the outside saw. And a part of that was the roster turnover that he just had when Nick Saban left. I mean, you lose a Caleb Downs and players like that he lost instantly. He gets to Tuscaloosa, and that brings on a challenge that maybe Nick Saban would not have had to endure, because when Nick Saban left, it left a quick vacuum of the unknown that you get in college athletics now with the easy access to the portal to get out, and a lot of talent left. And you'll hear Caleb Downs' name called in 21 days in the NFL draft very early on. And so he had to fill some gaps. And I think another obstacle that he faced that a lot of people didn't think he would have to face when he got to Tuscaloosa was when he got there, he inherited a roster that really didn't automatically fit his style, Jalen Milroe being one at quarterback, but you don't dump a team leader, a guy with Jalen Milroe's talent, so you adapt your system and you try to do the best you can do. And I think that's really what he has done the first 2 years in Tuscaloosa is take leftover Nick Saban pieces, which were great, and tried to fit them into his mold. I'll use an example quickly of what Kirk Cignetti did at Indiana. He was able to go in, bring a bunch of his guys with him, put his culture in place instantly because Indiana was on the dumpster. You could clean out anybody at Indiana, and nobody was going to think you were crazy. If Kalen DeBoer came in and started offloading 4 and 5 stars, they would think you're crazy. You couldn't do that. You had to play with the pieces you had because Alabama's talent level was so sad. I mean, so high, so big, and you didn't think there was just no way that Kalen DeBoer could offload any of those people to bring in lesser athletes that fit his style. So there were obstacles, and I think that's why he's so comfortable where he is in year 3 right now, as that roster continues to look more and more like he wants it to look long term to fit his system.
Jim, that's a great point, and I agree with you. You know, you say you've got a working relationship with DeBoer. You've spoken to him before many times. We at AL.com, we thought he seems like a genuine guy, and he seems
Yeah.
like a guy whose word you can take at face value. And the key part about what he said, what I read a little bit earlier, was the optics of leaving after 2 years. He didn't wanna run away, and what I'm impressed with about DeBoer is he seems like he's genuinely embracing the impossible challenge and task of replacing Nick Saban at a place like Alabama, and you come to a place like Alabama where there are obviously resources, there are expectations. This is a place where people want the football team to succeed at the highest level, and DeBoer seems to have, dived headfirst into that, and he deserves credit for it. Now that's gonna come with a lot of challenges too, and now he also said that he knew what he was getting into with the Alabama job because, quote, "There's noise everywhere, you coach. There was at Sioux Falls and Fresno State. Not like this, obviously, but wherever you are, you block that out," end quote. Jim, to DeBoer's credit, he said, "Not like this." So it's obviously different in Tuscaloosa, and he's got to compare to his own experiences. But how do you gauge DeBoer's understanding of where he is? Remember, culturally, there is a culture that exists and will always exist in Tuscaloosa, but he's also trying to build his own culture within that. How difficult do you think it is for him or anyone who isn't from here or of this place to quickly comprehend the stakes, the expectations that come with Alabama football?
I think he's actually doing better than people who knew what Alabama was. I'll go back to Ray Perkins following Bear Bryant, and here's a guy that was Alabama through and through, and he came from the NFL in, and I don't think he handled the noise very well at all. And he played at Alabama, played for Bear Bryant, and I'll go to Mike Shula, who played for Ray Perkins. And he had to plug in a place where Alabama was in a bad situation after the Mike Price firing. And I always appreciated what Coach Shula was able to do, but I don't think he always, recognized the noise that was going to be there around the Alabama program. Dennis Franchione, who was the first coach I did the coaches show for, he was the first guy to ask me, "Hey, will you do my coaches show?" And he had no idea what he was getting into when he came from TCU, that every loss would be a national, or actually a statewide day of mourning. And that's really what it's like at Alabama. Even in a day and age like this where um, it's set up where 2 losses and you're still in the college football playoffs. Every loss just brings such emotions, and for a week long of wringing of hands in our state. It's just the way it is, and always is going to be at Alabama. The fan base expects to win them all. And Kalen DeBoer inherits a fan base that's been like that forever, coming off the best period of Alabama football ever. Better than Bear Bryant, better than the 70s when I was a kid. What Nick Saban laid down for 17 years was unheard of and will likely never be matched again anywhere in college athletics. And he has to take that fatted cow of an Alabama fan base that has been given nothing but the best for 17 years, and he has to navigate that. So I think he understands it better than most, even those that played at Alabama or coached at Alabama before. I'd give him credit for that. What Alabama fans have to get used to is, I think, what Kalen DeBoer understands is that this is so NFL like, and that one loss or two loss is just part of the process getting to the championship playoffs. And that is something that's hard for anybody my age, anybody your age, and I guess anybody who's a new college football fan that's not used to this NFL style that we've got now. Two losses is no problem, especially in this SEC. So we've got to stop overreacting to a loss like we do in our state. I think that only hurts a program, whether you're Auburn or Alabama. I think it hurts Georgia. I think it hurts Texas. And I think you've got to be more adaptable to that. But I give Kalen DeBoer credit. I think he understands that. I don't think he knew it was going to be as intense as it is, but he knew that there would be noise following Nick Saban. I think he's handled it really great.
You mentioned Dennis Franchione. You know, he's the guy that to me has always been the closest parallel, not to compare them as people or coaches even, but, you know, Franchione had an off-ramp, and he took it after 2 seasons. DeBoer, based on some of the reporting and what we've heard, he had an off-ramp too, but he decided to stay, unlike Franchione, and so it's interesting. I'll have to pick your brain sometime about working with Dennis Franchione back when you were doing that show, because he's a fascinating figure in Alabama football history. But
Yeah.
just sticking with DeBoer, Jim, I mean, we've seen 2 seasons. He's 20-8 overall. That includes college football playoff win over Oklahoma, 2 wins over Georgia, LSU, and Auburn in the regular season, a trip to the SEC championship, one to the Rose Bowl. You know, he's talked about falling short of the ultimate goal during this interview with On3 Sports, presumably winning a national championship. He said, quote, "Every year you've got to reestablish your culture. You've really got to recreate an attitude within, and we're doing that right now." And he said, quote, "I think we took a step in the right direction as a program." So, Jim, you know, again, in year one, they win 9 games. They don't make the SEC title game or the playoff. In year two, they win more games. They make the playoff. They make the SEC title game. So they improved. Do they take that next step in year 3?
Boy, that's a wild card of a question. If I were to guess, I would say yes, that they're back in the playoffs and likely in a better scenario to advance at least to where they were last year and then have a better fighting chance. I love their quarterback situation. Not that I didn't love Ty Simpson, NFL quarterback in the future. He did so much. The only quarterback in college football, the FBS, the Power Five, to be sacked 30 times and have 30 drops of catchable balls. He endured a lot last year behind an offensive line that just was not improving. Schedule's a little better, so I do think they get to that magical 10-2. I love the way the Alabama schedule lays out. I think the receiving core has a chance to be better. The offensive line, they're going to lean on the portal. The defensive line, they're leaning on the portal, but the secondary is going to be good, maybe even deeper and better than it was last year. And I love what they've done changing. I give Kalen DeBoer credit that he changed the coaching staff on the offensive line, changing that whole philosophy. And I think that will show um, dividends. What is hard, I think, for Alabama fans to swallow is that Alabama's not the biggest spender in the SEC. And this is so much transactional now in college athletics. You know, this year it'll be Texas and LSU that will spend the most when we get down to it. Texas A&M will be good. Georgia, you know, does it more like Alabama does. And I think when this plays out long term, I think Alabama fans will come to appreciate the efforts that Kalen DeBoer and his general manager Courtney Morgan are doing, where Alabama's not poor by any stretch of the imagination, but they really do have a plan on how they spend their money and build their roster, and they do it with, you know, the integrity of this guy is this value to the team, but we're not going to overpay for a portal position to spite one of the guys who we recruited and brought in. And they really do a good job, much like Kirby Smart at Georgia, managing the money they have. And I have the utmost respect for what Courtney Morgan has done as general manager over there in building this roster during this era for what Alabama has to spend. So when it's all said and done, yes, I do think Alabama is one of 4 SEC playoff teams, and I think they'll have a fighting chance if those offensive and defensive lines to improve on last year. But that's, those are early predictions. I just like the fact that Kalen DeBoer is very comfortable with the pieces they're starting to put in with the style of offensive football they play. I don't think Alabama's offensive linemen held over from the Saban era were built to win in Kalen's system, and a little bit more agile, a little bit more um, not maybe as big as you would get with 5-star blue chip recruits. But if you look at Nick Saban's time as the head coach at Alabama from that 2020 national championship team, I think the offensive line play gradually has gotten worse in 21, 22, 23, and then in DeBoer's 24 and 25 season. So I don't think the offensive line play was a Kalen DeBoer issue. I think it was declining already. So I'm excited about maybe the transformation on the offensive line, and I think that could lead to the success you're asking about.
Yeah, really interesting. A far cry from that 2012 offensive line with guys like Chance Warmack and Barrett Jones and Cyrus
Yeah,
Quanjo, and
those
2020
were the
with
days.
yeah,
Yeah,
certainly. Or even 2020 with like Landon Dickerson
yeah.
there at the center. I mean, fantastic units. And you're right. I agree. Saw decline, but the most important position that everybody is going to be fixated on, regardless of these other groups. And I'll ask about those too in a minute. But the position battle that's going to dominate the headlines until a starter is named is obviously quarterback, right? And we've seen quarterbacks develop under DeBoer and now as offensive coordinator Grubb. But you were talking earlier about inheritance. His first 2 quarterbacks at Alabama, he inherited from the Nick Saban era, and now he's got his guys in place. They're going to battle it out to play for him. So Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, they're returning. Jim, to put it simply, for this team to be successful, this position is going to have to succeed. So, how important is this quarterback decision for Kalen DeBoer this year?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's a quarterback game, and nobody nobody gets to that final game that Kalen DeBoer wants to get to with inferior quarterback play. So that'll be a massive decision to make, and it'll be an interesting dynamic because everybody you talk to that sees every practice, every snap, watches the tape, Keelan Russell makes so many wow plays, but the people I also talk to will tell you that Austin Mack's floor is at a point that he never goes below, that he is so consistent. And his highs may never be as high as Keelan Russell, but his lows are never as low as Keelan's either. So the old battle of, do you go with the guy who makes such tremendous plays that you can't keep him off the field, or do you go with Mr. Consistency? I will tell you, the Alabama coaching staff, the people around the program that I've talked to, they love Austin Mack. There's a reason why the kid was recruited to Washington. There's a reason why he came to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer, even without Ryan Grubb. There's a reason why he's still here. There's a place that Austin Mack could have been a starting quarterback last year in football, and he decided to stay and back up Ty Simpson. So I don't think it's automatic Keelan Russell's job. Um, but in the long run, I do think he has the most talent, and I would expect him to win the job. But the decision, like it is every year for any college coach, is tremendous. You just look across the state to rival Auburn, and I think the problem they've had has been at quarterback. That's been their biggest downfall during this downturn of the Auburn program. Even when Bo Nix was there, they couldn't give an offensive line to allow Bo Nix to succeed. So he had to go to Oregon to succeed. And since then, they haven't had the right fit at quarterback, in my opinion. So it's a huge decision, but it is every year in college football when you have to decide between quarterbacks.
Jim, I mean, you've more than alluded to it already, but the offensive line is obviously going to be so critical.
Mm.
But I'm curious if you'll pick a different position group at this with this question. Like, what do you see as the biggest area where Alabama must improve? Like, I think it's pretty clear that they've got a couple of good quarterbacks. The defense was a high point in 2025 and a big reason they made the playoff after Ty Simpson was struggling with injuries and during the back half of the season. The run game was a non-factor. We've mentioned here that the offensive line was a mess for all the reasons that you laid out. But I'll put it this way. If Alabama reaches the playoff semifinal or better in 2026, it's because they fixed blank.
I I would say it's offensive line easy because the running game was so bad last year. And you've got to be able to run it at least a little better. You go back and look at Kalen DeBoer's national championship runner-up team at Washington. They didn't run the ball great, but they ran it good enough. And Alabama's not going to lead. I just don't think in Kalen DeBoer's system, Alabama's going to lead the SEC in rushing, but they need to run it better. But pass protection too, and the offensive line's got to get better. I also think some of the running issues last year wasn't all offensive line. I don't think the running backs were great at hitting holes and being aggressive into the when there were holes, being aggressive into the hole. So I think the improvement at running back, um, with Crowell and Deere and maybe a revamped Daniel Hill will help Alabama a little bit there as well. I trust Kane Womack to take these transfers from Oregon and USC and South Carolina and piece them together on the defensive line, but you are replacing a couple of beasts up there in Tim Keenan and James Smith. Keenan off to the NFL, Smith to Ohio State. Everything linebacker back is really good on the back seven, but it's the offensive line. I love the receiving core. I think Ryan Coleman Williams will have his best year yet in Crimson. Latsir Brooks became a star as a freshman, and I think Morgan, the kid, the true freshman that's coming in, is a 5-star. He's going to be, Ryan Williams on steroids, I believe. I think he'll be an instant impact, big play guy. So I love that position. I actually love the running backs. I'm not worried about quarterbacks. I'd go O-line and defensive line. And it sounds like we're talking about college football in the 1980s. You got to win in the trenches. But to me, Alabama's got all the parts. If they were to hit right on all the new parts on the O-line and D-line, I think we're talking about a team that could contend for an SEC and national championship.
100% right. That's how you win in the trenches, to say the
Yep.
least, and it'll make all the difference in the world. Hey, Jim, shifting to basketball, Nate Oats just led Alabama to a fourth straight Sweet 16 appearance, his fifth overall. He's been to a couple of Elite Eights, the school's only Final Four, a couple of SEC titles. I mean, blue chip recruits, NBA draft picks. I mean, Alabama is a national contender. We all know that Nate Oats is one of the best coaches in the country. So naturally, like DeBoer, his name pops up whenever there are openings for big programs. He obviously didn't go to Kentucky or Michigan. North Carolina is open now, potentially Kansas. But we saw Greg Byrne post recently that Oats is sticking around. So I'm curious what you think of this as somebody who's been around Alabama basketball for a long time. For a basketball coach of Nate Oats' caliber, do you think that he considers Alabama a destination job?
I don't know if it's his final destination. I know he hinted in a soundbite that he loves Greg Byrne and would like to be the guy he works with his whole career. I do believe Nate is so fascinated with the NBA, the style of play, that eventually he'll give that a shot. I mean, Billy Donovan did it, Rick Pitino did it, John Calipari did it. Um, I believe he will do it as well. Coach K flirted with it all the time. The Lakers came after Coach K late in his career, but all the time, when he would help the U.S. win gold medals with NBA players, Coach K would get asked all the time, "Hey, are you interested in being this coach, this coach?" So I think eventually, if Nate leaves Alabama, the NBA will always be something that's attractive to him because that's the style he plays. And boy, I tell you, a side note, I get so frustrated with the Alabama fan, of which I grew up one. I grew up in Alabaster, Alabama. But when you start saying, "Man, I just don't like his system. He's got to change his system." The reason Alabama's having the success they're having, getting the recruits they're having right now, is Nate's system. You got another great recruiting class coming in. He's attractive in the portal. What Preston Murphy and he are able to do in restocking, it's the system that they're coming to play for. They love that system because that's the system they're going to play in the NBA. So I've never liked the criticism of the system. Um, the college jobs that concern me, and I've never heard Nate say this, And maybe it's just an old sports reporter mistake that I make, but because he was so popular at Romulus High School and he is a folk hero in the state of Michigan, that if Dusty May were to leave Michigan, but I don't know why you would, and take the North Carolina job or a job like that. But more importantly, when Tom Izzo steps down at Michigan State, would those two jobs be attractive to Nate Oats because of his high school roots? And I don't know if they would be because, to your point, for a fact, I used to work in Lexington, Kentucky, and my sources, Nate Oats was number one on their list, and they were talking. And Alabama was in the Final Four at that time. And Greg Byrne quickly rallied the Alabama boosters, and Nate didn't want any more money for himself, but he wanted a little bit more NIL money, and he wanted that new basketball practice facility and offices that are almost built. That they might as well throw Nate Oats' name on that thing because that's why it's being built in Tuscaloosa, right next to Coleman Coliseum, and that will be so attractive to recruits. You only play the games in Coleman Coliseum, the practices, the workouts, the rehab, all that'll go on in that basketball facility that will attract so many players to the University of Alabama. I think that's a smart way to spend your money on that basketball facility there. That's the Kentucky wanted him. And that's what Nate got in place of a better contract. He'd already signed a contract extension that year. I don't know if he's been number one on North Carolina's list. He's been on the radar. If Bill Self retires, Nate Oats' name will be mentioned at Kansas, just like we were talking with Kalen DeBoer. But I don't think he leaves for another college job. I think when it's time for him to leave the the capstone, I think it'll be to an NBA job. I had a friend of mine send me a picture. This was in the middle of the season. I think it was 2 nights before an Alabama game, maybe at Tennessee. Maybe it was travel day. But Nate was at a Mavericks game, picture courtside, talking with some Mavericks personnel. Could I see him coaching the Dallas Mavericks someday? Yes. Could I see him coaching, the Chicago Bulls someday? Yeah. I could see, could he be the coach of the Pistons someday? Yeah. I could see Nate do that because that's where his system is. And he's so good in that system that he tours around every year to NBA camps and facilities and checks them out. And the NBA coaches know who Nate Oats is. And a lot of them watch his system like he watches their system, and they steal a lot from the European League. They steal is a bad word, borrow a lot and tweak a lot from what the Europeans do that end up coming to the NBA. So Nate Oats is an attractive professional coach. I don't know if there is a job that will interest him in just packing up and leaving Alabama at this point. But,
Totally.
as you record this, if we could record this, and 2 days from now, he could be the new coach at North Carolina. Who
You
knows?
never know. You truly never
Yeah.
know in this
Yeah.
business, but I fully agree with you that if he takes a step away from Alabama, it would be for the NBA. I think that's where he wants to be. I'm not inside his head. Who knows where he
Yeah.
wants to actually coach? But he coaches an NBA system. He's preparing guys for the next level in the NBA and to play professionally. So it makes all the sense in the world. And you're right. Like if the situation is right, if I can go to a team where there's already a young franchise player like a Cooper Flag, then maybe it makes all the sense in the world to him. But we'll see. It's
Yeah.
his decision to make. That being said, he's at Alabama for now, as far as we know. And you mentioned resources, right? Alabama, they've knocked on the door in the tournament, right? They've gotten there, they've gotten far, but they tend to run into these brick walls. Usually teams with these elite front courts, the UConns, the Dukes, and now the Michigans. They struggled against Arizona and Purdue and Gonzaga, teams with size, right? And like Nate Oats even said it after the loss to Michigan, Alabama has got to get bigger if they want to win at all. But they are also going to need more money for NIL to build more complete rosters. So if he's sticking around, presumably he's been reassured that he's going to have the resources to complete. So to compete. So Jim, do you think Nate Oats can lead Alabama to its first ever title in basketball?
It's getting this way in college football, but I've always said, and it's a cornerstone of what we believe on our show, always have, even back to our Jocks days, is that the college basketball national championship is the toughest one to win, more difficult than the college football has been. It's getting that way in college football with the 12-team and soon 16-team tournament because you got to win more games in the postseason against like opponents. So that has become more difficult than just playing one game and winning a poll or making it to a BCS game and winning one game or a 4-team playoff and winning two. It's gotten more difficult in football. But basketball, every game after that opening round, if you're an elite team, usually you've got a good enough seed that opening round is a gimme game. But then every game after that is an upset possibility. You're on a neutral site and you play a game, then you got to, it's almost like 3 tournaments you got to win. You got to break, then you got to suit up, win a Sweet 16 Elite 8 game. A break, now you got to go win a Final Four, semifinal, national championship. It is a gauntlet. So you've got to have a little luck there. And Alabama has had bad luck at times. Opponent helps out a little bit, but Alabama's best chance of winning a national championship, in my opinion, wasn't the team that made it to the Final Four. It was the Brandon Miller team. That team was built and constructed with an NBA superstar scorer in Brandon Miller, and they ran into a physical San Diego State team. And I do believe they just ran out of gas in Louisville from all the off the court stuff that had gone on with the incident on the Strip that year. That team just wore that on their shoulders the entire year. Jaden Bradley from that team leads Arizona to the Final Four. He's still playing basketball, and he was a big part off the bench on that team. That was a team good enough to be national champions. They had the inside game. They had, some shooting power forwards. They had the guards. The Final Four team actually, probably in the last 5 years, may have been the least talented of the Nate Oats teams. If you go back to the Brandon Miller year, the team that actually made it to the Final Four probably was, if you stack those teams up, probably is number 5. They just got hot at the right time and had the right opponents on the path to get there until they faced UConn. Do I think Nate can win a national championship? Yes. I think every time he runs into a roadblock like he did this past time against Michigan, he learns a little bit about, okay, what do we need to tweak with our system and our roster to get further, to be better at this. Look at the recruits that are coming in. Jackson Richardson, I think that's his name, 6'6" guy. So you got a little size, really good defensively, just showed off in the McDonald's All-Star game. He's a finisher at the rim, maybe doesn't have the outside shooting capabilities yet that maybe an Amari Allen or some of the other recruits recently have had, but he's really good defensively, and he is the type of guy that's going to fit in nicely next year at Alabama. They've got some scores. Ironically, the key piece next year, if he gets cleared legally and through the institution, will be Aiden Holloway. Do you bring Aiden Holloway back? Do you allow him to play? He would be crucial because you lose Millett, you lose Wrightsell, you lose Philon. You're bringing in some recruits, but nobody with the resume that Holloway has. So that'll be something to watch in the offseason. But, yeah, I do think he can win a national championship. But look at Tom Izzo, man. He's one of the best to ever do it. When's the last time he won one? 2000? A generation ago. Some people never get one. Some get one. It's been a long time. It's hard to get, but I think Nate has the capabilities of winning one for Alabama. Yes.
What are we going back to the Mateen Cleaves era of under
No,
Tom?
yeah.
I love that.
The Flintstones, the Flintstones, the kids from Flint, Michigan, that group, I think it was 3 players from Flint that led them to a national championship. That was, for some people watching this, that was their high school years or college years.
It was an awesome team.
Yeah.
Izzo's a legend, though. All right, well, before I let you go, Jim, in your many years of doing everything in sports media, you've served as host of the Nick Saban Show and different iterations of the head coach's TV show, postgame TV show. I was always fascinated with that, the whole behind-the-scenes process. It always seemed like it had to be a well-oiled machine because y'all would film that postgame, win or lose, right? So I have to think that it's something that you have to manage pretty efficiently, giving the premium that's on Nick Saban's time, right? So I'm curious, can you sort of paint a picture for us about how that worked? Like once the game is over, you're set up, ready to go. You're waiting for Nick Saban, and boom, lights, camera, action.
Yeah, to set up the way it was with Nick Saban, I got to tell you how it was with the other 2 coaches I did it with. By the way, we did do one Mike Price show. The day he was hired, we
That
sat down and recorded the Mike Price show, and I don't think it ever aired.
that's a 10 episode podcast series. We can get into that later, Jim.
Yeah. But with Dennis Franchione, we would record back in the old days. You would record them on Sundays. That's the way Coach Bryant did it here in Birmingham. And then it continued that way. And when I started with the Dennis Franchione show, so funny to show you how long ago that was. I was the young sportscaster then, and Dennis Franchione's people, after 1 year, said, "Hey, would you be willing to host the Alabama Coaches Show?" He wants a younger, more vibrant, more in tune with the times guy. And I said, sure. So I ended up doing the Dennis Franchione show. We did it there in the Malmore building on Sundays behind a big crimson set. And Dennis Franchione would watch the cut up of the highlights that we were going to talk about in a separate room, not in there with me. And he would send, I forget the guy's name, but he had a publicist. And he would send the publicist in to me with the questions that Coach Franchione wanted to talk about, wanted me to bring up. So basically, at that point, I was just, I was just a paid monkey. At that point, I was reading the script almost, but it was no big deal. I'd grown up wanting to be the voice of the Crimson Tide, so it was okay. Well, when I'm doing the Mike Shula show, we're still doing it on Sunday, and this time they'd redone the Alabama practice locker room, so we're recording them in the practice locker room. And I remember the very first one. I'm socially awkward. I I know it doesn't seem like a horrible job to be in when you're socially awkward, but I'm socially awkward. And the very first Mike Shula show, he liked to sit and watch with me the highlights. So we'd watch the whole clips of the highlights. And in the old days, we would actually talk over highlights, and coaches would explain plays, what happened, why they did this and that. Not that way with the Nick Saban show. So the very first one, they were having camera and audio problems after we'd watched the highlights. And I'm socially awkward. It's really the first time I've hung out with Mike Shula, one of my favorite coaches of all time. I loved him. He was so nice, he and his wife, Sherry. But in the pause of them getting the camera, we weren't really talking. And I nervously start humming fight songs occasionally. I can't sing, I can't carry a tune, but I just nervously hum fight songs and not intentional. I start going, dun, 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 not knowing what I'm doing. I'm nervous. And he looks over at me and goes, Jim, really? And I'm like, what are you talking about, coach? I always called him coach. And he's like, you're going to sit there and hum the Auburn fight song while you're doing my show? I didn't even know what I was humming. That was show number 1 with Mike Shula. So all that to get to the Nick Saban show, which with Coach Saban, I didn't. I stopped doing it. When Nick Saban came, I wasn't going to be the coach's show host. For some reason, I'd left local TV, so they let the local TV sports director at the station that was carrying the Nick Saban show replace me. And after 1 year, they were like, Coach Saban does not like this guy. Will you come back and do the coach's show? Absolutely. So I come back to do the coach's show, and they've changed the way they do it. You do it right after the game. Well, I'm coached up by Jeff Puritan at that point, the sports information guy, and Maxon. And I was sitting here going, all right, give me tips. How does he like it? Got to be ready to go. Got to be quick. He wants to get to recruiting. Got to be quick. Got to be quick. I said, all right, no problem. And we're not looking at highlights. We're basically just doing the shell of the show. So he walks out. It's the first game that I do is at Clemson, and it's versus Clemson. They beat Clemson in Atlanta. It's really the start of the dynasty. So he's in a good mood when he comes out. He comes out. I'd been off local TV for about 20 months. I'd put on about 30 pounds. No joke. First thing he does, pats me on the stomach like I'm a pregnant woman, pats me on the stomach, says, hey, we're going to need to lose that. I proceed over the next 20 months to lose 45 pounds. Coach told me I needed to lose it. I lost it. I got after it. So that was a fine show. He was in a great mood because they had waxed Clemson. The next week, I forget who it was, but it was some, directional school that they beat the crap out of. But I started to learn very quickly with Nick Saban. If they beat the crap out of somebody, he was going to be in a horrible mood on the coach's show because he wanted to bring his players back down to this level and the fan base back down to this level. And if they struggled, he was going to be in a good mood. But I didn't know that. But I was quick, man. I was quick, in and out. Hey, welcome into the Nick Saban show. Coach Saban, what'd you think of the first half? Or big win, what do you think of this? He would say it. All right, we'll take a look at the first half highlights. Back with this, and I was quick. About the fourth show that year, he goes, hey, you can talk a little bit more. And I was like, hey, it's the Nick Saban show. It's not the Jim Dunaway show. I'm fine. He goes, well, talk a little bit more. So I started talking a little bit more. 08, didn't lose a game. We didn't do the Nick Saban show after the SEC championship game where they lost to Florida or after the Sugar Bowl. It was just regular season. 2009, undefeated national champions, didn't lose a game. So I'm 2 years as the Coaches Show host, and I have not had to do a losing game yet. So we get to 2010, we're on the road at Columbia, South Carolina, and they're losing. And I'm losing my mind in the press box. I've got to worry about my local news stuff I've got to do. I've changed from back then they didn't want me to wear Alabama gear until I was on the show. My local TV people wanted me to be a journalist first. So I'm changing in my Alabama gear and I'm sweating. I mean, worse than I did on my wedding day. I'm like, what's this going to be like? They're about to lose, and I'm about to have to do my first losing Nick Saban show. And this guy has been really at times a pain in the ass after wins. I've never had a loss before. Well, South Carolina storms the field, tear down the goalpost, and they're starting to set up. Tom Roberts and the camera crew are setting up in the corner of the field outside the visiting tunnel. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? And they're like, well, we're setting up. We got to be ready to go when Coach Saban comes out here. I'm like, there are still 10,000 people on the field behind us, and they're still in the stands. We can't bring him out here to do this coach's show. That's insanity. So I go to Puritan and Maxon, and I'm like, hey, they're wanting to set up out here on the field. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. We can't bring Coach Saban out on the field. There's still fans, celebrating. And they're like, oh, what can we do? And I said, just set up here in this. I mean, there's a white cinder block room where they'd done a post game. You've been there, those road post games. It's in a small room, but it was just white cinder block. And so we drug the cameras in there, and thank God Puritan or Maxon, one of them had said, hey, Dunaway saved you right here. They were set up ready to do the show out there. So he comes walking in. The first thing he does was, hey, thanks for not dragging me out on the field. I appreciate you doing that. And he was the calmest, nicest guy after the loss. And that's when it sunk in that after the loss, he's going to pull his guys up. And I wish you could go back and watch, if you get a chance, go back and watch old game tapes. In games where it's going to be a close, hard-fought, like team tough games like LSU a lot, he's always very encouraging on the sidelines. Games where he knows he's better than everyone else, he's chewing ass from the kickoff. Like, you don't even run on the field correctly in those games. When he knew they had a better team, he's chewing you. But in games where it was going to be like competition, where it was going to be a tough game, he was such a great motivator, and he was always lifting his guys up. I've never been around anyone like him in sports. And I've covered some of the great ones, from Dale Earnhardt in NASCAR to some of the best in Major League Baseball. But that guy was so good at understanding people and getting them to do the best they could do, whether it was a broadcaster or whether it was somebody working inside the football facility.
Always teaching, always coaching. Right?
He was.
That was obviously and still is his calling. Jim, incredible story. And I know that there's plenty more where that came from. And this is just such a cool story, such an awesome macro view from a guy who's been doing it really well for a long time. You watch him, you hear him on The Next Round, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noon Central. Find that where you get your podcast too. Jim Dunaway, great talking to you, man. I hope we can do this again soon.
Anytime, man. I'm practically retired. We finish the show every day at 12 noon. I'm either golfing or just sitting here with my wife. So call me anytime.